Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. And this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hi, this is Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
Yay.
I'm so excited. Today is our first, I know we always say we're excited, but today we're doing an interview with one of the contributors to our book, and we are super excited to have you here. First, I guess we'll introduce you. This is Greg Enjalbert, and he is one of the sales professionals that we interview in our book.
Greg is a friend of mine in Bangkok. He is a world traveler, a world citizen, or global citizen, as we call it. Has history all over the world with different companies, and now is a coach and has a YouTube channel. He has a few different companies, and he's also a part of like big mastermind groups. He's really collaborative. He's just an all-around great guy. And one thing that I love about him, and actually is something that I want to open up with, because he talks a lot about having personal agency. And I think that this is really important because I actually really didn't understand that term until I started hanging out with Greg a bit more. And I think it's something that we should all be looking for. So Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And thank you so much for the introduction, Amanda and Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. That was very kind of you.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So let's jump right in because we don't like to waste time, as people know. You talk a lot before we get into the sales aspect, because I know this will lead into the sales aspect as well. You do talk a lot about personal agency. What exactly is that, and why has it played such an important role in what you do and who you are?
Okay, thank you for the question. That's a question that I love actually talking about. I talk a lot about personal agency because that's actually part of what I've put as part of my life purpose. So my life purpose is to help and inspire people to live with personal agency. And I came with that because I would say that when I was in, first, personal agency is about this capacity to know that you have choices in life, to see them, and to be able to go in the direction of those choices, make them happen. So it's this capacity to recognize that we can act. And the other way around is to look at it as saying, you never feel like a victim. You always feel that you have agency and that you can make things happen in your life. Okay. I always like to quote, the book from Viktor Frankl, which is Man's Search for Meaning. I think that's a very good book to understand that even in the most dire situation, you can have agency. So that's agency for me. And the other thing is I'm very keen into this because I remember that when I was a kid, I didn't have that much agency. So when I was in my early 20s, I basically acted like anything that was happening to me was not my problem. It was somebody else's problem. It was my environment, etc. And it's only when I started to work and produce something and somebody told me, hey, that's not bad what you're doing, that I said, hey, actually, I can do something and I'm actually getting acknowledgement for what I'm doing. And from then on, it's been the path of my life to recognize this need for agency, this possibility for agency, and to chase it and to make it part of my life and helping other people to develop it. So to see in them the agency and help them unleash their agency.
Yeah, I love that. When I hear you talk about it, it reminds me of like a lot of people, and I don't know if this is necessarily a global thing, but I can remember learning this when I was going through ICF certification about autonomy. And I know that they talk a lot about that and safety, having safety in the environment, et cetera. And I feel like autonomy is something that you can give to someone, right? So you can give someone autonomy, but personal agency is taking the responsibility of that autonomy and doing something with it and like really looking at it through a different lens. And I love that I think that's why like I connect with you so much, because we all know from the first book, I do not like people who play victim and all of that good stuff. And those that do something with the cards that they have and like take responsibility to move forward. And so I really appreciate that you talk a lot about that. And it is so woven through every part of what I see about you on a personal level and a professional level, that it's just so meaningful. So I love that.
Thank you. I try to. I think it's a journey to really bring it as part of everything in life. And you have to be very mindful and conscious about when you are actually departing it, because, we're humans, it happens.
That's so true, because I think a lot of people get into this mindset of it's all or nothing, but we're constantly a work in progress. And I 100% resonate with that, because I from a personal note, I would never want to be in that world, but not always, but occasionally I'll find myself slipping into it when I've had a particularly hard day, and you have to snap yourself out of it and be like, no, I have a choice. It's not doomsday. Let's move forward. Because I definitely, as Lynn has said many times, and it's very much the truth, I tend to fall towards the negative. And so I have to really work to get that up. But it's a personal autonomy. It's your own responsibility to take care of that. So I absolutely resonate with that.
Absolutely, Amanda.
Yeah. So you have I love your history, and of course people can go to the book, and on our website we're going to have your bio once the second book is released in March.
February/March.
Yeah, which this is probably around the time that the podcast is coming out, 2023. So the sales edition is the one that you interviewed for. However, you talk, about your history, about the railroad and how you worked yourself through from the bottom up, and you got to experience all these different aspects of anywhere from a trainee to mergers and acquisitions, which is incredible. And I know that that's only one small glimpse in your career life. But however, I know that that has played a big part of how you approach things, not just in the things that you learned through the business, but also through yourself, through that time, through the healing process, all of that. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because again, that will lead into some of the questions we have around sales, since we do want to talk a little bit about sales besides highlighting you.
I've had, let's say, well, thanks for the question. Talking about my past is always a bit interesting, because I've lived in a lot of different countries, and when you talk about global citizen is really how I see myself. So yes, I'm French. You can probably recognize that in my accent. But at the same time, I've lived in 6 different countries, and it's not like passing by in 6 different countries. It's living and really spending time to learn the culture and the language. So I've got a bit of I learned Spanish when I was in school, but I've learned German when I was in Germany. Obviously, I've lived in Canada. I've lived in the UK. I've lived in China, so I also speak some Chinese. And now in Thailand, where I'm still learning Thai, and I think it's better than my Chinese now. So all of that makes that you can learn a language, and I think it gives a window to the way people think. And cultures are different. People think differently. They have different backgrounds. A small example, is to look at the Chinese language is based on characters, and each character means an idea. And it was, back in the day, it was called the oracle bones. So the first character were actually engraved on turtle shells. And all of that was very, based on what you see around you, a tree, the rice, everything was really based on concepts around you. Whether if you look at the language we speak in English, in French, it's based on 26 letters, which mean nothing, which are assembled together to form words. It's a complete, construct. And it's a very different way to look at the world. And when you see things like that in different countries, you discover different ways of looking at things. So I've always been very curious about any field, anything really, whether it's science, literature, philosophy, biotech. So and going into different countries, I think it's just keeping that interest, going. And also different functions. Yeah, I was a trainee, and then I was doing marketing, business development. Ended up being a project manager, building, high-speed railway in China, and general management. And now I'm like what I would call more of a solopreneur, and doing a lot of things which are based on giving back, but on an individual basis. So it's I like diversity, let's say.
I love that. And I love that you brought up that about the languages. It's quite intriguing. And I will say, for those of you who don't already follow Greg on LinkedIn or on his YouTube channel, like that curiosity turns into content, which I really appreciate, because you're doing something proactive and productive with that need of wanting to be or having that curiosity. So I definitely love that. So check that out. Amanda, did you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to say that's a really beautiful way to describe learning a language, because I know in learning languages myself, it was always just like, how do they even come up with this? Like, why is there a masculine? Why is there a feminine? How come this has a symbol? And, what does that symbol even translate to? And I was learning Greek, and it was just, it's amazing to think about how we can. I don't know, anybody who learns English is just baffled by the English language. It's completely confusing. And I'm sad for anybody who has to learn it as a second language, because it's very confusing, but it's a really beautiful way to think about it. And I had never even thought to, because I was raised on English, I never even thought about, and the Romance languages are so much easier for me to understand, because obviously it's all in the same 26 character, alphabet. So I didn't even think about that. So that's a beautiful way to describe languages. I want to go learn some more languages.
Absolutely. It cracks me up because, how you said that we have the 26 letters and we have to construct. The first thing I think of is like, yeah, of course we have to overcomplicate things. Like we have to make so let's jump into some of the sales aspect. So tell us, what's your first experience of sales that you can remember?
First that I can remember. Okay. I think I fell into sales like completely, but not by mistake, but just I was delivering, high-speed rail in China. So first I was a junior project manager, and then after I was a project director it's a 1,000-kilometer line going from Wuhan to Guangzhou. And that was really the first very high-speed line. And nowadays in China, just for reference, there's about 30,000 kilometers of very high-speed line, with trains running at 350 kph. So I was happy to be part of that first thing. And so we delivered it, and it was great. It was like 2.5 years to deliver something like that, which we had never done in the entire history of the company. But in China, it's like, okay, do things fast, get them done. And we got them done. So it was great. And I'm like, okay, so here we are at the end of 2009. We've delivered that beautiful line. And then the customer calls me and say, we want to buy more. I'm like, well, I'm the project manager. I'm not really the sales guy here. But then we don't really have anybody who is doing sales about selling high-speed lines in China. So they say, yeah, but we know you. We know you, and we know what you can deliver, and we trust you. Because in China, it's really, it starts with a relationship. Everything that you do at work starts with a relationship. So it's quite different from a Western perspective, let's say. And so I start to say, okay, so how do I sell this? And the only thing I had with me was just like a bit of rational thinking, logic about, okay, so what do they want? What is an acceptable price? Do I have some reference system somewhere that tells me how I can sell this? And asking people around me about how do you sell this? And they're like, well, not completely sure, sales is, there's not really an academy for this in this company. You just go and do it. I'm like, okay, well, let's just go and do it. So that's my first experience of building, like how do I sell a high-speed line in China? That was,
That is a much harder beginning in sales than I feel like I have ever even thought about. I feel like my first sales was like selling a t-shirt, and you're talking about selling lines. That is an incredible learning curve on without having any training and not having any sort of backup and how to like system to set up. That's impressive for sure.
Yeah, it was easy in a way because if people trust you, they trust you that you're going to come to an agreement at some point because they want something and you have something. And you know, they know you, so they know that one way or another you're gonna get through it, you know. And it's a bit messy. It was a bit messy, yeah, because I didn't know anything about it. But it was messy from their side. They didn't know how to buy. I didn't know how to sell. And well, we worked it out, I guess.
I love that.
So what do you think is the biggest lesson you've learned in sales?
I think it's relationship, really. Even now, with a completely different way of selling, for me, it's been about the fact that if you build deep relationship with people that you're selling to, yeah, everything becomes much easier because it's based on truly understanding each other. And once you truly understand each other, you understand if there is some sort of overlap between the two people about do we have a negotiation range? Do we have something that we know we're going to get through because we understand the overlap of what you want, what I want, and how we're going to make that happen. Okay, we don't know where exactly we're going to end, but we know that we have that area where a deal is possible.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I know in the book you talk about active listening. So it's not just about the relationship, having a great relationship, but it's also how you navigate that. And I'd love for you to kind of expand on active listening because it's definitely something I talk a lot about, especially as a, you know, once you're trained as a coach. Like they definitely talk about that. But the active listening and powerful questioning, I think, is huge. Not I think I know in sales and in developing relationships further. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that aspect.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, active listening, as you say, you know, I mean, in my job nowadays as a coach is kind of like, if you don't have that, well, don't be a coach. But in terms of how we actually live our relationship with each other, it's massively important. And there are different levels of listening that we can do. The non-listening level is basically you're talking and well, I don't care. I'm doing something else. So, you know, and it's probably very visible that I don't care. And usually the reaction on the other side is like, okay, all right, well, I'm walking away from this and I really don't like you. Then you have the listening, which is like somebody is talking to you, but the first thing you're thinking about is you. You're thinking about everything that you're gonna say next. You're like, yeah, you're saying something, but that makes me think about what I want to say. And so you go with this type of, you know, answering, and that doesn't work very well either because it's basically if it goes on with both sides, it's one person say what they want to say, the other, and basically they're not really having a conversation. The third one is when you start to actually, yeah, you listen to what the person is saying. You just, you know, you're just listening. You say, mm-hmm. You've got the, you know, the verbal and non-verbal cues that you're actually there for the person. Then you go into something which is, you know, more, I would say, empathetic, which is you're starting to really try to put yourself in the shoes of the person. Okay, so you're asking questions, you're trying to go deep into not only what the person is saying, but the way they are feeling it, where they are coming from, in why they are saying it this way. What is the situation? What is the background, the history that makes them say what they say, the way they're saying it. And that's for me, when you reach that level, that's when you really create deep relationship with people because you listen to their brain, but you listen also to their heart in a way. So it's very important in sales. And you know, you've got the traditional cliche, which is salespeople are very talkative and empathetic, and they will be out there, you know, talking to clients. Well, my best salespeople that I had in my team, in my corporate job, were the people who were actually listening. They were listening to the customers. They were there, you know, they were listening to them complaining. They were listening to them for what they wanted, whatever there was to listen to, they would listen to, and they would be able to adapt offers they would be able to adapt their way of approaching the customer to be there for them in the ways that they needed it. So that's why for me the whole active listening is it builds relationship and it helps you understand what the person really wants.
I love, and sorry, man, I'll let you ask the next question, but I do want to like make a point is I love everything that you said about that because it definitely speaks to me and the type of person I am. And I definitely have practiced active listening even before I knew what it was. And I want to bring it back to a comment that you talked about with the high-speed train, because you made a comment about you didn't know how to sell, but they didn't even know how to buy. And I think that part, bringing it back to the active listening, is like maybe they didn't say that they didn't know how to buy, but you knew intuitively, you heard because you were active listening with all of your senses and your knowledge as well. So you were active listening with the knowledge that you had behind you. And I know that might seem kind of a little bit far out there. However, to me, I've seen people who can really like break down and not necessarily put the active listening into a box and go through the motions, but really embody it. Those are the ones who really form those deeper connections that really are able to see, am I the right solution? Do I have the right solution? Can this be the right solution? And how do we have that dance together? And I think that that's something, because I know you weren't an ICF certified coach at that point, that just has lived in your being for a very long time. And I find it, I love that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Elaine.
Yeah.
So if that's one of the things that you consider to be one of the most important aspects of sales, what piece of advice would you give someone in sales? Like what's the one piece of advice that you think someone needs to have in order to be a good salesperson?
But it's interesting. I was reading a book yesterday, which was about appreciative inquiry. And in this book, they talk about a simple method, which is first pause. Okay. So when you're in this situation with a customer, and imagine that you're a salesperson who likes to talk. Okay. That happens. We all come from there. I started that way. Okay. So I didn't become this active listener overnight. I was not born that way. I actually had to realize that, I was very self-centered when I was in my 20s, and eventually had to realize that, you need to move away from that because it's not very productive in your relationship with people. So one of the good things that I've learned is also, in my job, I've had a lot of people coming with bad news. Saying, when you're running a business with railway running all over like 14 different countries, at some point there's going to be a breakdown. There's going to be passengers stranded and things like that. And people are going to look at your company and say, hey, what's going on? So early on in my career, I would react. So it's a bit like, the salesperson talking or reacting to news. But I learned to do one thing, which is to pause, to create the moment between what's happening in front of you to the moment that you're thinking and saying, how do I want to react? Or how do I want to behave here? And I think when you're selling with people, it's really to pause. It's to have time to actually examine your own thoughts, where you're coming from, where the person is coming from. So breathing also helps, if people are having stress about the situation because they feel an obligation to sell, or they have a boss telling them, you need to reach your numbers, blah, blah. What you do, but if you pause, if you breathe, you will be able to actually use that part of your brain instead of more like, the amygdala. You won't be in a stressful situation. You'll be able to access more resources in yourself. And then you can start to really be able to listen to the person. It takes time, I would say, Amanda. It's not something that you do overnight. It needs a lot of training. You don't become an active listener. You don't silence that voice inside you right away. It takes some time. But I would say, pause, breathe, formulate the way you want to handle the situation in your brain before you speak.
I think so many people forget to pause. I think that's something it's almost like we feel like we need to fill the silence with an immediate answer. That if we don't instantly answer, either it's going to come off that we don't know the answer to their question, or that we just aren't smart enough to know what to say then, or it becomes almost awkward to have that pause. But it is actually really important. And I struggled with this for a long time, just like actually stop talking, because I don't naturally want to talk. But then everybody told me I had to talk in order to do sales. And so then you talk, and then you talk too much, and you're like, so I love that. I think it is so important to remember to pause and to actually say what you mean to say, and give people the time to, to think about that sale themselves, and give them the time to wait for their response rather than trying to fill in that silence with whatever you think you need to say. So I love that. That's great advice.
Yeah, I agree. We talk about this a lot, but even when I'm training sales, like once you ask the question, get comfortable with that silence, like let the other person, and that's not the only place you need to pause. However, that's one of the most important places you need to pause is after you ask for the sale, and take that breath and get comfortable with that uncomfortableness, because they need to process it themselves. So when you fill their thoughts with your wording, then you're not giving them the ability to feel, to think, to process, to whatever their kind of internal thing is. You're allowing them to not live in it. Right. And so I love that you said that. However, I love that you did say, like, it's not just at the ask, like there are different parts through the process, and just even being a good human being, like pausing and allowing that silence to happen even outside of the sales process, I think is really important.
That's where it starts, I guess, Lenny, is the things that we apply in our life, which are actually good as being good human beings for each other, as you just said, are actually the things we can use in our jobs. And that's the secret.
Yeah, I love that. I think also the one thing I'd like to add here, and it's something that I've definitely been more conscious of recently, because I was conscious of it. However, I kind of got away of it, and now I'm back in, is like asking when it's appropriate, asking if they want a response, or asking if they want an explanation, versus you diving in and giving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agreed.
Hey, any last pieces of advice or information that you'd love to give our audience? I can't believe it's already almost been 30 minutes, and we definitely like to be mindful of our time. But anything else that you'd like to leave up?
Well, I think, the part about I do coaching and I do mentoring of people because I love the aspect of developing agency, but also developing all those, human skills. We've talked about active listening. That's one of them. Knowing how to ask questions in a better way, you get very different results. You get very different perspective and directions with doing that. So yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about that in my YouTube channel, A Cup of CoFi, and yeah, that's what I want to give back. So I hope that people will work on what makes them human, and all those skills that make us better at handling any situation, which is useful for salespeople and it's useful for anyone actually.
So how can people get in contact with you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. You have my YouTube channel, A Cup of CoFi. I'm also on Instagram. I'm not a big Twitter user, but you can probably find me there too. That's the best way. I would say LinkedIn is probably one of the best way. I'm very active on LinkedIn.
And of course, all of your information will be in the show notes. So if anybody's curious about reaching out or wants more information, or the exact YouTube link, that's Cup of CoFi, COFI, and that will be in our show link. So you can have direct access to that. You don't have to go trolling and searching the internet. It will be listed there in the show notes for you.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you coming on. I know that we could talk to you about all different types of things, so we might have you back. And we really appreciate you definitely saying yes to participate in our book, our next book that's coming out. You have such a wealth of knowledge, and I've really appreciated your friendship and your knowledge. And definitely, if you are listening to this, start following him on LinkedIn. He does a review a book a day or like multiple a week, like, and then he has all of your YouTube videos. It's just incredible. All the knowledge that you bring and very different perspectives too. I love that you are not one dimensional with the way that you look at things. You really do use your curiosity to be able to like pose it in different ways. And I love that. It's just, it's wonderful. So thank you so much, Greg.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. That was a privilege, and participating in your book is a privilege. So thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda and Lynn.
Excellent. All right, everybody. That's another podcast down. Thanks again, Greg. Amanda, what do we say?
Get after it.
Awesome. See you next time. All right, everyone. It's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.